Good morning, everybody, and welcome to BTL, day number 4, with our friend Frank Scalish. Frank, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How you guys doing?
Doing great, Matt. You all right in Tulsa? Everything okay, man?
Yeah, everything's phenomenal. These are probably going to be the most educational series of BTLs that we've ever had.
I think you're right. Absolutely. Now, before we get
back and listening to Frank.
High expectations. I love it.
That's right. All right. Now, before we get into the fishing stuff, the task at hand is this, Frank. The Browns are in the playoffs.
Yes, they are. And
but they don't have a coach.
We don't have a coach. We're out a couple of players. It's typical with Cleveland luck. But I'm just glad we're playing Pittsburgh and not Buffalo, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
We got to play a game like we haven't played in a long time.
Yeah. Now, how long has it been? 18 years? Is that right?
18. Can you believe that?
That's a long time, man. What was the guy's name? Brian Sipe playing then?
Yeah, back then it was the Siper Bowl. That's what everybody called it here. Now I guess we're going to call it the Baker Bowl. I don't know.
That's pretty good. All right, folks, we are going commercial-free day 4, and it's very important for everybody out there, all the BTL fans to understand. The reason that we're doing this day 4 is simply because of Frank's willingness to donate his time to educate and really entertain and engage the fans here on BTL. But we could not do this if it wasn't for the support from LureNet. And I can't thank all the staff at LureNet. Obviously, Frank's involved with LureNet and has been for a while, but they stepped up, and they are really, really important to the continuation of providing the fans this educational, engaging, and entertaining moment with Frank Scalish. So many thanks to the people that made that happen, and we're going commercial free because of lurenet.com. So make sure you check that out and all the stuff that Frank's doing over there, Frank.
Appreciate that for sure.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the Browns. What about Ohio State?
Oh, whatever. I mean, going into the thing, they won 6 games. They only played 6 games. And do you think they made the right decision when the powers that be suddenly decided, we're going to miss out on a lot of money if we don't play football this season?
Well, that's exactly how it went down.
Yeah.
That's how the whole college program went down this year.
Not with the Big 12. The Big 12 was like, hey, we're playing football.
Yeah, they did. I give them that.
Hey, Frank, did you design that sun perch color in the flat A on LureNet that all those guys are?
I want to take credit for it, but no, I didn't do that one.
Oh, okay.
I think that was brought back from the old days.
Yeah, that's a Jeffries bait, by the way. I would never have had those, but Jeffries loves a flat A.
Yeah.
Yeah, the deep flat A is a good bait.
That's old school. That's old school, isn't it, Frank?
Yeah, it is old school. Yeah. That and the Bomber 6A, that whole series. That's what we cut our teeth on.
I know, man. There was a period of time. That's all you threw, Matt, at Grand Lake.
A flat A and a Bomber 6A?
In the 90s. That was it.
You wouldn't throw a DD22 as well?
Well, in the summertime, but that's different. I mean, I'm talking
so like the springtime.
Yeah.
It was either a spinnerbait with the Colorado blade or flat A or a Model 6A.
That's it.
Well, here's a throwback. How about the original Deep We Are from Rebel?
Oh, I got a bunch of those. Like I found a bunch of those, and my buddy was like
freaking out.
Chip was like, "Oh, dude, that you need that," and it like sat in my tackle. Like I had 4 of them that in like a. It was like a weird painted craw color. Like it was like painted into the plastic, not on the surface of it.
Yeah, it's called 035. The color is 035. It's brown, bone, and orange.
Yeah, I had some of those. I just gave him the chip, I think.
Oh, dude.
Bad move,
like giving
man.
away wiggle warts?
Yeah, that's like giving away the original wart. That's a bad move, dude.
That is a bad move.
That's so
Jeez.
funny. I can't believe you gave him away.
Right.
There's guys that would pay mucho dinero for that bait.
That's a bad move, man. That's part of your retirement there, just being given away there, Matthew.
Dude, I'm fishing 9 opens. There is no such thing as a retirement bait.
You know what? I'm going to vouch for that.
Wow.
I'm going to say you're right on the money with that one.
All right. Frank, here's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna kind of get on a roll here. If people have questions on the instant feedback or on the YouTube feed, just throw them out there. I'll try to get to as many as we can. But part of this feature is and kind of help the people out on what they would use to maybe have some success out there.
That's correct. We're gonna call the segment Bait School. That's what we're going to call it. And then what'll happen is we'll have a current pattern that's happening across. We'll try to keep it, across the country. But, if you're in Florida, it's going to be much different than if you're, in the middle of the United States. But anyway, we'll try to keep it congruent to what's happening currently. So you have current up-to-date info. And then when we do Bait School, whatever patterns we're talking about, I'll go into the bite specs on those patterns. And what the bite specs are going to be, it's basically going to be the how, when, where, what, why of the whole pattern.
All right, man. Sounds great. Now, how difficult right now, here it is, we're in the first part of January. How difficult is it in your area to do a little winter fishing?
It's never difficult here until the ice starts to make it a problem. The ice started coming in about 3 days ago, and we were cracking ice to get out because it was mostly shoreline ice. So we'd bust the ice, get out, and we were catching a lot of fish. I was catching a ton of fish up until about a week ago. And then we had 2.5 feet of snow, and then the next day it rained, snow melted, water temperature dropped to 34.3 degrees. Which is ludicrous because it's like a slush bath. And so what happens is when the lakes freeze, the surface temperature will be around 34, 32 degrees. But a few feet underneath the surface, it's usually like 36, 37. And then the other day when I was out, I couldn't find anything warmer than 34 degrees. It was rough, real rough.
Wow. Now, before we get into tactics and all that other stuff, I want to know, for the people out there that may be venturing out when the water temp gets super, super cold that, is there anything that they need to be aware of from their boat standpoint, from a motor standpoint?
Well, the first thing is backing in off the ramp. You're going to bust all your trailer lights off. I've replaced trailer lights 4 times a season, probably. Yeah, seriously. I in fact, on my little boat, I have an aluminum boat and I have a bass boat. So on my aluminum boat, I put the lights on the trailer, but I put plugs on them so I can unplug them before I back in. But the thing you want to watch for is any of your transducer cables that are down. The ice will cut them like a knife. So you want to be careful of that. And then the biggest thing boat-wise is when you get out of the water, trim your motor, leave it on the ramp so you're at an angle, trim your motor way down, let all the water drip out of the motor, take your plug out, open, keep your live well valves open, let all the water drain out, crank the motor over for a second or two to blow the rest of the water out of the cooling system, and then just leave it drip for a while. And then you should be okay. This is bad, but I'll tell you guys the truth. I've never winterized a boat motor in my life.
Wow.
Yeah, I never have. Now watch. Now I'll blow my freaking motor up. As soon as I say that, where's some wood? I got to knock on wood. But yeah, and that's pretty much it. But you know what? More so than the boat, the most important thing is you. So I always carry an extra change of clothes, and I carry a towel with me, because if you ever go in the water in the wintertime, you don't have a whole lot of time to get yourself right. So You got to be careful.
One of the things I always do when I'm fishing alone is I will tie off like just a section of like the rope that you would normally tie off to the cleat on that. The Bass Cat has that little cleat next to the driver's seat, and I'll just put the rope around that and then just put the rope in the seat. So that way, if I do go in, if I'm fishing alone in the heavy clothes, the first thing I can do is just have that rope that I can hold on to and wrap around me, and I'll stay floating 100%.
That is money, dude. That's a money thing. Here, let me tell you something crazy. So where I live, there's a hot water discharge. It's not active anymore, but it used to be. CEI owned it. It was an electrical plant. So they use the water to cool it. And they suck in the cold water, cool the turbines, blow the warm water out. And we used to fish the hot water discharge in the winter all the time. So here's what happens. The carp go in there, the walleye go in there, the smallmouth, pretty much every single fish on the planet goes in there because it's like a food source. When the turbines suck the water in, they suck in all the shad and emerald shiners, and when they blow the water out, they're blowing out chum, basically. So everything gets in there, and they sit there with their mouths open and eat everything that comes out of the turbines. So we always went in there, and one winter I was in there, and I was catching steelhead and brown trout. And this is no lie. I told my buddy, I said, and I had my deer hunting jumpsuit on, which is basically like an anchor if you go in the water. There's nothing. So I tell my buddy, I said, you want to catch some huge carp? He goes, what are you talking about? I said, I'm talking about carp as long as your leg, dude. Like you'll pick them up by the gill plates and standing up, and their tails are on the bottom of the boat. So he's like, yeah. So I pulled out the little grubs. We just used white grubs, and I mixed up anise oil and blackberry stuff, because carp have a sweet tooth. Squirt it all over the grub, fire it up there. You bounce the grub down, and you got a 40-pound fish on the end. You know what I mean? So here's what happens. The kid was not a fisherman. He just went with me, and I thought it'd be fun for him to catch something, 40 pounds. So I'm like, here, do this. So I catch a little one, which was probably about 12 or 15 pounds. I catch a little one, and I went to the side of my boat, and I leaned over to go get him, belly land him. And my buddy came across the boat to see the fish. Well, the boat barely moved when he came over, but I was so far over the side of the boat when it moved, I went head over right into the hot water discharge. And this was like February. Okay. So I grabbed my rod, and I threw my rod in the boat. I said, grab the rod and hold the rod. And dude, I grabbed the side of that boat, and the current was so strong, it sucked me right underneath the boat. And I came out on the other side of the boat, and he had grabbed my collar on my jumpsuit. He grabbed the collar, and thank God he grabbed the collar. And I'll tell you what, that rope idea you had is money, dude, because it was everything I can do to get myself back in the boat. And I was younger then, so it should have been like no problem for a young dude. I couldn't do that. Suit weighed 1,000 pounds. So I got in the boat, and it was probably 19 degrees out. I got in the boat, I took the suit off, I took all my clothes off, I dried off with a towel, I reached in, I had another deer hunting suit in the boat with me. Climbed in that deer hunting suit and fished the rest of the day.
Wow. So another little thing, if you make that rope about 5 feet long and it's against a cleat, you can put basically a stirrup on the bottom of it. Just tie a lasso, and then you can actually use the side of the boat if you don't have a ladder on the back of your boat, which a lot of the older boats don't have ladders on it. That's kind of a newer feature. And you can actually use that rope kind of as a step. You can get your foot in that rope and kind of hoist yourself up. The other thing I do by myself, and I did this after I pulled a guy out of a canoe a couple years ago in a Carhartt jacket with no life jacket, crappie fishing on Lake Thunderbird, and I was the only boat there, 100 yards away. Did the same thing, went over, was fishing, watched him go out of the canoe, went over there, he was sinking. I grabbed him by the back of the collar, hauled him on the back deck, like super strength because I was all jacked up, and and I was like, this is not safe by yourself. So a lot of the rain jackets will also have like a little zipper pouch like this right here. Dude, the phones are waterproof. If you go in by yourself and you can't get back in the boat, like I put my phone in the wintertime in my waterproof case in my rain jacket, like in my bibs.
So
because if
accessible.
I go in, I can at least then get to it while I'm hanging off the side of the boat or the back, or can't get back in and call someone.
That's true.
I mean, otherwise, so what? You're saved there, but you can't get out. Now you're stuck. Now you're in 40-degree water, stuck without anyone coming to get you. You shouldn't be fishing alone in that middle of the winter anyway. But
no, and here's a news flash. I mean, hypothermia, you got about 4 minutes. In 40-degree water, you got about 4 minutes.
Ugh.
And you got hypothermia. And the problem with that is you also, if you're lucky enough to get back in your boat, you got a long run to get back to the ramp. So if you don't have dry clothes that you can switch into, you're going to be in bad shape by the time you get back. And that's the most important thing about fishing this time of year, especially up here, because it's no joke. I mean, you're talking water temperatures in the 30s. And it's just no joke.
Will you catch them right on the surface? Because when I went ice fishing up in Minnesota, we were catching crappie that were literally, they call it scraping the ice.
Yeah.
Because the bait fish were dying or were so lethargic that they were up against the bottom of the ice. Will you see the bait fish that are dying and come, and the fish will be a foot down in 38-degree water?
Yeah, here's the crazy thing. Last 5 years, I haven't caught a bass deeper than 8 feet in the wintertime. And now this year is different. For some reason, this year is different. I'm catching them much, much deeper this year, which kind of threw me for a loop because it's been so predictable for so long. And here's another neat thing about the wintertime. Bass only winter in certain areas. You know how you get around the country fishing too. You know how massive these lakes are, right? And the fish are not everywhere, obviously, or everybody would catch them all the time. In the wintertime, they even occupy less of the water column. So now if the fish were occupying 20% of the water column in the summer or spring, now they're occupying 5%, 7%. So you really got to hone in on them. So what happens a lot of times in the winter, guys go out and they don't catch anything. And so they're like, oh, I'm not going anymore. It's crap. They don't bite in the winter. And the thing is when you find them in the winter, there's so many fish where you find them, you catch a ton of fish. And I catch some of the biggest fish of my season in the wintertime.
Wow. All right, let's talk about winter fishing down south a little bit. When the season kicks off early, what are your thoughts about going to Florida in the month of January, Frank? What's been your history on that?
My tournament history in Florida has been crap, to be honest with you, but but I love fishing Florida. January in Florida can be awesome, and it could be tricky. The spawns, you'll get spawning in Florida that starts in December. It won't be the main spawn. It'll be little trickling spawns. And then as January rolls around, if the moon's right, you'll get a major spawn January, February. Florida fishing is great in those times of year because that's spring everywhere else. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so you're focusing around vegetation and spawning areas. The cool thing about Florida, if you understand the grass, you understand where the bass are going. Certain grass grows in sand, certain grass grows in mud. And so if you recognize that, then you narrow down your searches.
So how did you learn how to recognize it?
Trial and error. Because when I started fishing Bassmasters, I'd never been on any of the lakes prior to that. And so when I first went down to Florida, I just thought that it was just going to be like a slugfest. Everything you see on Florida is holy crap. You find the grass, you find the bass. Well, what happened was, I mean, it's crazy. So what happened was when I went down there, the first couple of times I went down there, I struggled a little bit. And then I started understanding, this grass isn't growing in sand. This grass is growing in mud. And then I realized we call them mother-in-law tongues. I don't know what the real name is. Maybe arrowheads. They got the little arrow thing that sticks up. Mm-hmm. I realized at Okeechobee, they spawn on those things. They spawn against them. So once I figured that out, it was like, oh man. So you'd see a bulrush island in the middle of nowhere, and then you'd see 10 or 12 mother-in-law tongues sticking off the end of it. I knew that was where the sand was. So then once I started doing that, it started getting better for me. I mean, and Florida's cool because you can go down there and, throw a devil's horse all year long and catch them in and around the grass on that topwater bait. It's like, it's crazy. Florida's
Is that because they target the needlefish down there, and the devil's horse is the best profile to needlefish?
You know, you're the first person I've heard even talk about a needlefish, and that's
because I'm doing research, man. I'm doing research. I got that open in March.
Yeah, that's exactly right, dude. Florida has needlefish, and they're super cool animals. It represents that profile perfectly, and it works all the time there. And if you ever seen needlefish in the water, they're mostly transparent. They have a little silver side on them and a bluish green back to them. But there's another thing that they got in Florida too, Matt, that you need to recognize. They have grass shrimp, but it's not the little bitty tiny grass shrimp that you're thinking about. They're the size of crayfish, and they're transparent. They're very transparent, and they have these olive green hues to them, but they're mostly transparent. And that's was a real key thing one time at Harris Chain, I think I was on.
So like a translucent green pumpkin plastic?
Yeah. Yep. Translucent green pumpkin. Green pumpkin blue is really good down there. June bug always works in Florida because of the tannin color water. So June bug always works down there. You could take your those shad imitating baits like flukes and Houdini shads and stuff like that, and you can use those in June bug on a real light slip sinker. I'm talking like 1/16 ounce or 1/8 ounce, and you just pitch them up against the bulrushes or pitch them up against the mother-in-law tongues and just let them go down, and then don't do nothing with them, and all of a sudden your line starts going here.
So the lightweight, is that because there's decaying vegetation on the bottom and a heavier weight will go down through? So I learned this when I first fished the opens on, what's that, Ross Barnett.
Yeah.
And I was going through and there were pad stems, and it was literally, I was watching 10 to 15 boats cave their heads in. And
that's right.
I never had a bite, and I'm flipping a 3/8 ounce on a beaver style bait, and literally people are all around me just having the time of their lives.
Yeah, here's a good
I came in with 2 1-pounders.
Yeah, dude.
And it wasn't until later that everyone was like Jeff Sprague actually fished that as a co-angler in event, so Watson could get into the event. And I was like, dude, I literally watched you catch 15 3-pounders, and I caught nothing. And he's like, dude, I was using a 16th ounce weight. What were you using? I was like, ½ ounce. He's like, you were 6 inches into the muck, bro.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's actually the truth. Florida, my rule of thumb in Florida is the lightest weight possible at all times on any soft plastic, unless you're punching. Because if you're punching mats, it's different, because what happens a lot of times when you blow through the mat with a 1 ounce sinker and you let it fall down, if your bite doesn't come as soon as that thing punches through the mat, I lift it up so it's at the top of the mat, so the little creature's at the top of the mat, and then I shake it underneath so it's banging up against the top of the mat, and then they come up and get it. Because a lot of times if you're not on a hard bottom area like a shell bed or something, the minute that thing goes through, it's 8 inches into the mud and all the decaying.
So when I go down to Florida, I basically need to have a notepad with a drawing of the type of plant and then what type of bottom it grows in. So like I'm a caddy, like I can then consult my book to be like, oh, that appears to be bulrush, meaning that is a mud bottom. There's mother-in-law, like that is a sand bottom, because there's like 15 types of vegetation down there.
Oh yeah, absolutely, dude. Absolutely.
Right. Hey, Frank, I got a question real quick on the instant feedback. Dave wants to know, what type of bottom is it that pads grow?
Well, pads will grow on a mud bottom or a clay bottom, but the key with the pads are the roots. Lily pad roots, and bass will actually spawn on lily pad roots. If you ever seen a lily pad root, basically they have the profile of an alligator. They're all bumpy and knotty and gnarly, and they grow parallel to the bottom. They don't grow in the bottom like a tree root. They grow parallel, and you got all these lily pad roots all on top of each other. And that's the main focus in the lily pad fields.
What about up north, like where you are? Because there's a lot of different vegetation up there. I mean, do you have mud bottom up there?
Oh yeah. Well, we have mud, clay, sand, rock, everything that's all around. We have the same thing. Milfoil is a good grass to always focus on wherever it is. But we have a grass called coontail here as well, which is real fluffy, looks like raccoon tail, real fluffy. That's a really good grass. Bulrushes will grow here, and if you can find a hard edge on the outside edges of the bulrushes, that's money. Eelgrass, we got a lot of eelgrass here too. We're getting more now. That'll grow in the sand.
All right, let's do this. Let's take a few questions, and then we'll get into what were you calling it? Bait school?
Yeah, we're going to call it bait school.
All right, we'll get into that here in a minute. Let me flash up this question. Ask Frank if he has spent time on Dale Hollow, and if he has, any tips for fishing through the winter.
Okay, I have not spent a ton of time on Dale Hollow, but you have to realize that Dale Hollow, the blade bait was made famous on Dale Hollow, and so is the float and fly. What you're going to probably concentrate on there is you're fishing for smallmouths, and with a float and fly, you're going to look for 45-degree angle banks, real steep banks, or long points that come out underwater. Once you find the depth range that the smallmouth are suspending on, you set your float and fly a couple feet above that, and then you throw it out, and as the fly pendulums down, you leave it alone, and it'll pendulum back and forth. And then the smallmouth will hit it. And it's kind of fun, dude. It's like bobber fishing. All of a sudden, the float goes underwater, and you got them.
All right, here's another one. On a lake with contour, bluff walls, points, lily pads, weeds, and riprap, the summer water temps get in the high 80s, low 90s. What depths and areas are best to target? Example, northeastern Pennsylvania reservoir, no docks.
Got it. Okay, here's a big key, okay? In the summertime, the 80 and 90 degree water temperature doesn't mean a lot, okay? Because when you idle off the ramp, when you launch your boat and you idle off the ramp, the first thing I do is I look for bait fish. Whatever depth I see the bait fish on my screen, if the lake has shad, emeralds, alewives, blueback herring, whatever. As soon as I see a ball of shad on my graph, I know what depth range the shad are in. So then I look for structure that tops out at that depth range. So for example, let's say I idle out and I come across a couple of balls of bait and they're in 15 feet. I'm going to start my structure search at anything that tops out at 15 feet. And that's where I'm going to start looking for my fish. Okay. Now as summer progresses, fish truly get offshore. So they don't need something that's connected to the mainland. But after the spawn, post-spawn, early summer, they'll be on long transitional flats that are still connected to the mainland but go out into the lake farther. So those are kind of the things you want to look for. And if your lake has, and I'm very familiar with a ton of lakes in Pennsylvania, so if your lakes have the right kind of grass and stuff like that, you can catch them shallow really good in the summer too. So you got to really, pay attention to what that water's telling you at the time.
Are there thermoclines on grass lakes?
Yes. Yes.
There are. I mean, so you're basically using the bait fish to find the thermocline.
Yeah, and yes, exactly. And here's another thing too. In natural grass lakes or grass lakes, even if they're reservoirs, grass lakes, seldomly do you have to fish deeper than the deepest grass grows.
So if it grows out to 14 foot, you're pretty much 14 foot or less.
Right, exactly. Because that's where all the food chains stay and put. In fact, later on we'll show a video and it's a grass lake I'm on, and that'll lend itself real well to this exact conversation. Even though it's December.
All right. Hey, they want to know, Frank. All right. Here's another question from Clay. What bottom does hydrilla grow in?
Now, I'm not 100% familiar with what exact bottom they grow in because I've seen it everywhere. So I'm going to say hydrilla grows anywhere as far as I'm concerned. Hydrilla is cool because hydrilla can grow deep. I mean, deep, deep. I mean, I've been in, 20-foot sections of the lake where the hydrilla is at the surface. So hydrilla is confusing to me, but hydrilla is a bass magnet. Gets great canopies and caverns under it when it mats up. It's like highways underneath the grass. When I fish hydrilla, I ignore the grass and only concentrate on the structure that's beneath the grass. So if I'm going to fish a hydrilla stretch, I want to fish rock piles within it or high spots or depressions. I just pretend the grass isn't there and structure fish, and then the grass becomes a bonus.
That's literally the way the guys in East Texas fish. Rayburn, Toledo Bend, like that. Yeah. They say, hey, you look out over it and you see the forest.
Yeah,
and you fish it like the forest doesn't exist. Or the guys in the Ozarks fish Lake of the Ozarks because everything has docks on it. So instead of going down and saying, I'm going to fish this row of docks or I'm going to fish this timber, they say, this is why I'm fishing this stretch, and there just happens to be docks and timber there that they're using. So you're doing the exact same thing with grass. It's all about the contours, not about just the grass is there. And then that takes some of the intimidation factor out of it.
Well, yeah, it shrinks the lake. I mean, here, realistically, you could fish miles of grass and never get a bite.
Oh, I have.
Yeah, same here. So yeah, absolutely. So the thing is you pretend it's not there. The first time I went to Toledo Bend, before the tornadoes knocked all the trees down, and you look out on it and it's a flooded forest as far as you can see. That's the first thing I did. I ignored all the trees and went structure fishing. And then the trees that were on the structure where the fish were at became important, but all the other trees were meaningless. And that's the only way you could shrink a lake down. It's not as complicated as we make it. We see that vast forest and then we freak out. Oh my God, this looks great. There could be a bass everywhere. You launch your boat in Florida and you feel like you could start fishing by the boat ramp and catch 30 pounds. And it's, you gotta take away the main, everything that you see that's the most of, you got to start ignoring it and focus on what the contours are telling you.
And then once you get a bite or two, I mean, to me, so the way I say that, so Sam Rayburn, when you're flipping flooded stuff, it's like everything looks flooded. 3 days in, 3 days in, you pull up on a flooded stretch down in like Deer Stand or something, and you're like, there'll be a fish there, and there. Where 2 days ago it just looked like flooded stuff. It just starts popping out to you where you need to fish then.
Exactly, and that's honing in on the pattern, which a lot of guys have to understand. There's patterns, and then there's patterns within that pattern. So you could have said, hey, every time I went to a willow bush, I caught a 1 pounder, but every time I went to a hardwood, I caught a 4 pounder. So now all of a sudden you see, 300 willow bushes, but you see 2 hardwoods laying down. You go right to the hardwoods because now you're upgrading your pattern. You're honing in. You're figuring out where the bigger bites are coming to.
And then in a roundabout way, it's not, hey, I got a lure net and bought Frank's color and caught fish. You have to get through that part to get to the part where your paint schemes and the bait and stuff matters, because now you're around the fish. So that's the hard part. The easy part is tying the bait on and catching them. The hard part is spending the time and all the BS of not catching them and trying to figure it out and getting rid of all the red herrings and getting to where the fish are. And then that's when the micro nuances start making a difference.
Yeah, and you're 100% correct. I mean, that's the name of the game. The name of the game is finding them. Look, people ask me all the time, dude, what's your favorite lure? And I say, whatever I'm catching fish on at the time. and that favorite lure could change in 2 hours. You know what I mean? That's the whole magic of this sport. This sport is like, dude, this sport's like pulling a lever down on a slot machine. Okay. It's like a gambling addiction, because the better you become at recognizing the patterns, the more times the bars come up on the machine. You know what I'm saying? So and when you have a bad day, like when I have a bad day, I get crazy. I start writing everything down, trying to figure out where I went wrong, how where did I take the wrong turn in that day? Like when I was younger, this goes back to what you were saying, Matt, about figuring it out. When I was younger, and I mean really young, okay, I was probably in my teens. We would go, and back then I think the tournament trail was called Red Man. We would run down to the Ohio River, and I would get my brain sanded out by these guys that live on the Ohio River, and I would be like, how are these guys doing this? You know what I mean? So I would spend every free minute I had driving 2.5 hours, 3 hours down south to fish that river every free minute I had until I figured it out. You know what I'm saying? And then once I started figuring out the nuances of the Ohio River, and the more I knew what I was looking for, it's just like you said earlier, all of a sudden you're like, oh, there'll be one there, there'll be one there, there'll be fish there. And that's the only way you do it. Time. You have to put the time in.
And you know, you have all these guides and different guys. You charge what, $350 to $750 a day, and you're like, oh, these guys are making a killing. But what you're paying for that guide's time, not the 8 or 10 hours or 6 hours that day, but for the years and years before, where that guy is figuring that stuff out to where you wouldn't be able to go out. You're like, oh, well, he just took us out to the spot and we caught fish and stuff. But what you're paying for are those years and years of knowing where all that stuff is and all the trial and error.
Yeah, it's the experience. You're paying for the experience. You know, when I was growing up, you guys, we had Block It on, and he was talking about all the electronics and stuff like that. And now he's, starting to see that electronics are very helpful if you know what you're doing. The electronics aren't going to find the fish for you. You still have to find them. The electronics give you the ability to see them. When you make the right decision, oh, hey, look, there's fish down there. You know what I'm saying? And so, but it's the same thought process throughout. It's your experience. The more experience you have on the water, the faster your decision making becomes, and the more accurate your decision making becomes. And in tournaments, dude, it's all about that split second. We got to switch. We got to move. You know what I mean? And that just comes with experience.
Hit him with that question mark, because that's all this stuff is applicable. So I see that where he said, my big problem is flotation. I'm a miserable dude fishing from the bank. You can still do map study and stuff on public lakes and figure out, hey, can I get to the shore where this channel is? Can I get to the shore on this rocky point? Can I get to the shore on that? So, this stuff is still applicable even if you don't have a boat.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, patterns are patterns, and fish behave the way they behave, and they're totally bank accessible most of the time. There's always bass shallow. I don't care what time of year it is. Now, it may not be the most high percentage time to be there, but there's always bass shallow. There was a thing, they did a set of videos on LureNet called, I think it was called Small Waters. And that's exactly what it was. The whole premise of that show was for bank fishing, for pond fishing, for small rivers and streams and stuff like that. And it's really a good series, because it showed the bank angler that, yes, you know what, just because you have to walk doesn't mean that you can't catch fish, because they're always accessible. You know what I mean? In some way or another, if you do the right thing, you're going to catch them. That's just the patterns.
Very nice. A lot of stuff on the instant feedback here. Over on basszone.com, somebody wants to know, what do you do when it comes to research? Like you were talking about Google Earth and everything else that takes place from a technology standpoint. Do you use that, or is it just on the water experience?
No, I use Google Earth a lot, especially in the beginning when it first came out. It gave me the ability to get on a lake and look, especially grass lakes, because then I can see where most of the grass is. And you'd be surprised. I mean, you can see channel bends, channel swings, and if the water's clean enough, you actually can see shallow rock piles and stuff. There was a pond, speaking of ponds, there was a pond that my kids and I wanted to ice fish, and they stocked it with trout. There's walleye in it. I call it a pond. It's a small lake. And there's no maps of the place. I Google Earthed it, and I happened to go back in time on Google Earth and got a clear picture of it. and I saw light spots. And so I got my phone and I put a, mark on all the light spots.
Mm-hmm.
We went ice fishing out there, and I went right to the marks I put on my phone, drilled holes, and we started catching trout and walleye and everything. And they were rock piles. You know what I mean? Google Earth can help.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, this is just my lack of knowledge because, I'm not into the whole big-time tournament fishing from a participation standpoint, even fun fishing. I don't use Google Earth. Is it real time, Matt? Because I know you use it a bunch. In other words, is it like this is the way that it looked 2 days ago, or this is the way that it looks right now?
Years based on it. So they'll have historical imagery that you can go back. But Clark Ream is doing some crazy stuff over where he is actually doing similar. Remember when Steve Kennedy was downloading the squares individually off and figured out how to put it on his card? So Clark is doing the same thing now to where he's like at Louisville. It freaked me out because I had borrowed a couple little crankbaits from him at Neely Henry, and I roll up on him, and he's just practicing on a final day at Louisville. And I said, "Hey man, I'm gonna give you your crankbaits back." And I was like, "How's it going?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm freaking dialed in." And I was like, "Crap." he's like, "Dude, you gotta see this. Hop in my boat." This is during practice, and he had his Navionics map over historical image data on Google Earth. So like on his Lowrance was Google Earth. So like you could see when the lake was 7 foot low, a boat ramp that was sticking out, and then he had it like all outlined. So then his outline showed up on top of his Navionics chip. So what looked like just a rounded clay point would have a red square on it. Well, that was a boat ramp that was no longer used. And now he can go throw a Ned rig on it. Because I had a co-angler and I got back in and I was like, dude, I did not do near enough history for this. I said, I am fixing to get my ass handed to me. And I think he ended up catching one fish and I caught like 3 fish. But it didn't work out. But just that level of stuff that he was doing with Google Earth, and I think he might be selling it, doing some of this stuff with his teaching. And I've known Clark for forever. The guy works his tail off in the industry, but it's really cool. I could have described that incorrectly, but basically he was taking the Google Earth from the best image, importing it somehow into his unit, and then being able to use it with his Navionics. I don't think it's a Lowrance feature. I think it's something that he's individually doing because he says it takes him hours and hours and hours to do a lake.
Yeah, he's always been technologically up there. As long as I've known him, he's always been on the technology. He's always been ahead of the curve.
All right, here's a question from YouTube. We'll take a couple more questions, and then we'll get into bait school, Frank. Frank, can you talk about when is the right time to move to another spot?
Yeah, it's the right time to move is when you're not catching fish. Really what happens is it just depends. Like if you're summertime structure fishing, in practice, I pay attention to when I get the bites because a lot of times they'll be on a time schedule feeding wise. So then I'll make a milk run accordingly. I'll try to always be on each spot at its, bite time. That's the best way I can tell you. If you're fishing shallow and you're flipping or throwing spinner baits or what have you, if you're not getting bit, chances are the fish have moved. And if they didn't move, you got to come back later and try again because you're dealing with their moods. You know what I mean? So the worst thing you can do is spend too much time for nothing somewhere. That's the biggest mistake guys make.
What about the infamous saying, "You don't leave fish to find fish"?
But if you're catching them, then you don't leave them.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because I gotta tell this story. I'm embarrassed actually, but I'm gonna tell it anyway. 2010, we're up at Sandusky. We're smallmouth fishing. I'm already in the classic, and it looks like I already won Angler of the Year. So basically, I just got to catch a fish. I catch a fish, and everything is good. So I figured I would just go play it safe, run to a harbor, catch a couple largemouth, and call it a season. Well, I can't do that. So I said, no, I can't do that. I can't be on Lake Erie and go catch a largemouth. I got to go smallmouth fish. So I get on these smallmouths, and I was catching them in 2 feet of water, burning spinner baits, and they were tanks, dude, tanks. So I pulled up on the spot the first day of the tournament, and I swear to you, I made 6 casts. I caught 6 smallmouth and had like 23 pounds. Okay. I sat down in the bottom of the boat, and I'm like, well, I've been fishing for 9 minutes, and I'm not going to stay here. I said, I'm going to leave. I don't want to ruin these fish for the next 2 days because I could win this thing. So I'm not doing it. I'm leaving. So my non-boater goes, what are we doing? I said, we're going to go find more fish. We'll go look for deep fish in case something happens. Then I got deep fish to go to. So I leave those fish. I go find some deeper fish, and I'm catching a lot of 3-pounders, none of which I could use. Long and short of it is, second day of the tournament's canceled. Third day of the tournament, I go to those shallow fish, and there's 4 or 5 foot rollers rolling in on them. I can't even get close enough to cast on them. The water's all muddy. So I run to one of my deep spots, and I catch about 19 or 20 pounds and wind up in 3rd place in the tournament. I think Jonathan Van Dam won it. And KVD calls me, and he's like, dude, what did you do? I said, well, I ran to my first spot, dude. I caught 6 fish and I left. And he's like, are you crazy? He goes, you should have stayed there and caught them till you couldn't catch them anymore. He goes, you would have probably won the tournament. He says, first of all, he says, you can't catch them all, number one. And number 2 is you got to take what the day is giving you. And so after that I changed the way I fished after that, because he was 100% right. I probably gave the tournament away. You know what I mean? That's when they say don't leave fish to find them.
Yeah. All right. Cool stuff. I know a lot of people out there, Frank, really enjoying what you're passing along to the fans on BTL. So great stuff. All right, let's get into bait school, man.
Let's do it. You got a video?
I do. Let me get it queued up here.
Am I talking over the video?
Yes.
Okay, so what we got here is it's December, and I'm fishing a Flash Mob Junior. And what we're on is we're on a grass lake, which brings us back to the question of, fishing as deep as the deepest grass grows. So what I'm doing is I'm fishing a grass ledge that drops down to about 16 feet of water. And I'm throwing the Flash Mob Junior rig out there. And what I'm doing is I'm feathering it down the grass edge. I'm not paralleling the grass edge. I'm feathering it down the grass edge. Okay. And controlling how deep that Flash Mob goes down there. All the bass are schooled up on the baits above the bass, and all the bass are schooled up on these little ditches that these grass edges make. So here's what I'm doing here. In this video here, I'm actually explaining about rod length, action, and pound test line. Okay. So those would be part of the bite specs of the Flash Mob Junior. So let's back up a little bit. So here's what I did. I went out and I figured out where the bait fish were, the depth range of the bait fish. Okay. Now here's the key part to remember in the wintertime, especially when you're fishing a Flash Mob Junior. You have to know the depth range that your bait is in. Okay. That's the first most important thing. The next most important thing is you have to decide if you're on a grass lake, grass is going to be your target. And it doesn't mean the grass is actually the target. It means the structure around the grass is the target. If you're on a lake with 0 grass, then you're going to look for 45-degree sloping banks, channel convergences, where you have 2 creek channels that meet, or short pockets, short, steep pockets, especially in some of the lakes in the southern regions. You'll have these super deep, short, steep pockets, and all the bait suspends right in the middle of them. And the bass will be right below the bait. So here's the thing. Okay. I listen, throwing the Alabama rigs and stuff. It's not one of my favorite techniques. It never has been. But like everything, if you're weak in it, you got to do it a lot. So you becomes a strong suit for you. So that's how I learned how to fish this thing. So here's the biggest trick. Okay. For example, this particular body of water, all the fish were coming between 12 and 14 feet. Okay. So here's what I did. The first cast I made, I cast it out and I count it down. I count it down till it hits the bottom. Then I reel it in and I make another cast, and now I count it down, but I shorten my count by 3 seconds or 4 seconds. And then I start my retrieve, because now I'm keeping the bait above the bass. And the reason you got to keep the bait above the bass is because this time of year, and with all the bait fish suspending, the bass are feeding up. So if you're below them, they're not going to go down and get it. They feed up, they look up. And so that's the whole key to fishing the Flash Mob Junior. The other thing I noticed was the size of the shad. And this lake particularly is a shad-based lake, shad, perch, and crappie mostly. So I looked at the size of the shad, and I was throwing the 3.5 pulse minnow on my bait. So that was the whole key. I went to the 3.5 Yum pulse minnow and a 3.5 money minnow. I stayed within that 3-inch range because that's where how the size of all the bait. The rod length, dude, 7.5 to 8 foot, and you want a soft tip, but you want a medium heavy action rod. I see guys make a lot of mistakes by throwing too stiff of a rod, because the bass will take that bait. It's just like when they hit a spinner bait. You got to give them a chance to get it. You know what I mean? That they'll suck it in, and that little flex in your rod tip gives them the chance to engulf that bait. Too stiff of a rod with a moving bait like that, a lot of times you'll take it away from them. And so you don't really want to do that. The other key to remember when throwing these Alabama rigs, guys, is certain states have regulations. You can only use so many hooks. So in a lake like in Ohio, where you can only use 3 live hooks, I have 2 dummies, and basically they're the same exact jig head I'm using. I don't switch them up. I just cut the hook off and glue the swim bait to the head. Normally what I do is I run the 2 dummies on top, because if you look at an A rig, you'll have it's got 5 wires on it. Okay. So you have the 2 wires come off on the top, 2 come off diagonally on the bottom, and you got 1 long one in the middle. So what I do is I put the 2 dummies on top. Now this is important. Most of the time, because the fish are feeding up, they're going to take the 2 bottom ones or the long one that trails behind. Okay. But if I get bumps and I don't catch the fish, all right, and it happens frequently, then I switch the dummy heads around. I flop them, because if they're keying in on the top ones, then I want live ammo on the top ones. If they're keying in on the bottom ones, I want the live ammo on the bottom ones. And that's pretty much, the bite specs on this lure. I fish it generally from 52 degrees to 40 degree water temperature nonstop. And I keep it nice and slow, moving slow. If the deeper I fish, the heavier heads I use. The shallower I fish, the lighter the heads I use. Like when I was in last February, I was on Lake Norman in Charlotte, and the spots were schooling up on shallow shoals. So I was throwing the Flash Mob, but I was using 1/32 ounce heads, barely any weight to them at all. But I was running it over shoals that were 3 to 4 feet deep from the surface. So you can adjust this bait. This bait is infinitely adjustable. Conversely, my buddy was in Michigan last year, and they were catching fish in 35 feet of water, and they were putting 3/8 ounce and 1/2 ounce heads on this thing to get it down there. So you just adjust your weight according to your depth and according to your speed. Obviously, if you're going to fish it earlier in the fall, you can use heavier heads and reel it in much faster and keep it down in the water column. And as the water cools down, you slow it down. And so just use the weight of the jig heads for that purpose.
That's cool stuff. How much does color matter, Frank?
Color's crazy. Like I see guys rig a different color on every bait on that thing, and I'm like, guys, come on, man. So what I wind up doing is I rig 3 colors the same, and then have 2 colors the same. So I got 2 different colors. Or I'll run 4 colors the same, and on my long dropper, I'll put a different color on the long dropper. Just something different. So when the fish gets there, he sees something different. He might like it better. But I don't play games on my flash mobs with a million different colors at the same time. I want it to look like a school of fish. So I keep it that way.
All right. I want to go back to the video here real quick. Hang on. I'm getting it set up.
I had another video. Same day I caught one almost 7 pounds, but there was something in the background that I couldn't have in there because everyone where I'm fishing will know where it is, and I'm like, well, we can't do that.
All right, that spot right there, where you got hooked up, as we see kind of the background and kind of what the bank is like off of that point right there. What was special about this area, Frank?
Okay, that's actually a really good question, Mark. what I'm in is I'm in a secondary creek channel arm. Okay, and right where I'm fishing, I have 2 creek channels that come into that place. Behind me, not the way the boat's pointing, but the way my motor's pointing, the creek channel dead ends about 200 yards behind me. It just fizzles out into nothing. And so it was like a natural funnel, and all the bait was migrating up there. The water was on drawdown, and all the bait was migrating up there. So it was actually the perfect place. I mean, we filmed the show there. My son was with me, and he was doing my cameraman. We filmed the show. We got the show done, and after we finished the show, we went fun fishing. We caught 53 bass that day. Wow. And we caught a ton of them over 4 pounds. It was a phenomenal day.
And you're doing all this by feel. You don't have forward-facing sonar.
No, I don't have forward-facing sonar.
So this is all just by feel, where the edge of the grass is, what the bottom is, figuring out where these fish are, old school.
Oh yeah, I found the bait on my locator and knew what depth ranges I had to concentrate on. This particular lake has coontail, eelgrass, milfoil, and some funky weed that I don't know what is, but I don't care because the bass don't use it, whatever it is. And so what I found out was that the milfoil was the key this day.
You do any other tricks to that Flash Mob Junior? Because it's a very versatile bait. I mean, like you said, you could throw it deep, shallow. I mean, any other? Do you stick with the same hardware on it?
Yeah, I do. You know what? You brought up a great point. I use the exact same hardware that comes on it. I don't change anything, but I do 2 things. I do 2 things. I have one here. Let me see if I can get it.
Dude, I'm gonna go get mine too. Then you want me to go get mine too? Then because I got the Flash Mob Juniors.
Dude, these baits are money. Okay, so all right.
Hang on, I'm watching the video while you're getting stuff ready there, Frank.
Wait a second. Hold on a second. Where's my rig? Oh, I know what I did. Okay, I can't show you that, but I can tell you about it.
I've got one. If you want me to hold it up, you can show whatever you do to it.
Oh, I have it, but I'll show you guys. Okay, so here's what I got. And I don't have it on now. I don't have it on now because I undid the O-ring and put the O-ring and the swivel on my fishing rod. So all I got to do is put the O-ring on the Flash Mob when I get it back. But here's what I do to it. I put an O-ring on the nose of I put an O-ring. Where am I at?
Hold on here.
Hang on.
Here we are. I got a bait. I put an O-ring on the nose and then a crane swivel on the O-ring. When I take the bait off, I just undo the O-ring and I leave the swivel and the O-ring tied onto my rod. The other thing I do when I store it is I put a zip tie on it to store it. So when I go to rig it, I just slide the zip tie off, and bam, the bait comes alive.
That's perfect for storing.
Right. So here's the key. This is a key fact. I'm getting all this old grass on my computer. Here's a key fact, okay? When you roll the arm up on your rig, okay, don't bend the wire. What I do is I put my thumb on it, a half an inch behind the head. I put my thumb on it and I roll the wire around my thumb. So what it does is it creates a round bend, not a hard angle. What this does is it saves the life of the arms. It gives you more fish catches per arm because you're not bending the wire hard. You're rolling it around your thumb. So what happens is you get a lot more life out of the wires on your bait. And those are the main key things I do. The O-ring and the swivel prevents line twist. You'll get line twist even throwing a bait caster if one of the baits hangs up on itself and it starts to roll when you're reeling it in, or if a bass strikes the bait and pulls it down, pulls one of your soft plastics down, and then the bait will roll. So what that swivel and the O-ring does is it actually keeps the bait running true and straight.
I got one more hack that you might like. So I hate being on the front deck, like trying to fish with the A-rig, and then you have to figure it out. So like there's your A-rig all like ready to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I do is I got a big O-ring, and I just, before I spread everything out, I just put it on the bait. So when I'm done fishing, I just take that O-ring and I slide it down, and now it's a complete perfect package. And then when I'm ready to fish again, I just pop it out, and then the bait pops out again. And then when I want to do that, I store it.
I like your way better.
So you can also
go your way for that from now on.
So listen, you can also do it with shrink wrap tubing in the plumbing section, right? So you can take a big one, like cut a really thin strip, and it just stays at the top there when you fish it. And then when you want to store it, you just do that and you slide it down. And now your bait is perfectly like that. And now I can put 20 Flash Mob Juniors in there, completely rigged. Like here's one that's completely rigged like that. It's got the hooks on it. It's got the two, that's a BFL rig. It's got the two little deals. And then when I want to rig it, I just pop it out and boom, it pops out.
Money. I like that better.
Actually. But so here's the deal with yours. You can start getting into the others that have bigger rings and stuff. That zip tie works perfect because you can put it on the bottom and it keeps it like that. Yeah. So I need to do the zip tie.
See, and I like your way.
Here, show the zip tie way one more time. Yeah. Now that I got this figured out.
Okay. Right. I just put the zip tie up there, and then when I'm ready to fish, I just slide it off.
Yeah.
And then put it back on. Now you could do it either way. You could take it off the back or off the front, but it's easier off the front. And see, when I leave my O-ring and my crane swivel on my rod, then I just take the O-ring and I just put the O-ring on there and I'm ready to fish it.
Mm-hmm.
Piece of cake.
The other thing I do a lot of times, especially if you have to cast into the wind, it's really hard to a lot of times, those baits will tangle with each other.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I get an extra 1/8 of an inch by just shrink wrap tubing that to where you still have
you still get the
like that, but it keeps, so like these aren't turning in. So when it casts, it makes it just a little bit more rigid, because the beauty to me of the Flash Mob Junior is the thin wire on the arms. So when you get it in a piece of grass or something and you stop it, you get it to collapse and flare. But
absolutely.
The beauty of it is also the reason why it's a pain in the ass when you try to cast it with heavier weights, because they tangle,
the wires
and you end up with a swim bait orgy on half your cast.
Dude, you're teaching me something today, Matt.
But
that is outstanding.
But yeah, that's the easiest, and I don't know for the life of me. So, like I said, why the companies haven't done that yet is just that, and now I'm storing it. And it takes 10 or 15 minutes, and you can either do it with the big metal one, there's the metal one there, or the plastic.
That's outstanding. Love it.
Yeah, I got them all. So you can just hold. Now you can just put them all in the tray. What are your thoughts on hook gauge? Right? Do you want a thin wire hook that is going to penetrate, or do you want a thicker wire hook to where you can winch the fish in on the A-rig? Because I go back and forth on this.
I go back and forth too. Yum has a real nice hook out. It's kind of an in-betweener, and I like that a lot. But I like it more so they're 3/0 size because it's a short shank. I want a shorter shanked hook on that thing. I don't want a long. I want most of my pulse minnow moving, so I want a shorter shanked hook in it so more of the bait moves. Same thing with the money minnow, because I'm throwing the little money minnow and I'm throwing the little pulse minnow, and they're small. You're talking about 3.5 inch baits.
Mm-hmm.
This one's the money minnow, this one's the pulse minnow. So what I'm doing is I want the hook. I don't want the hook all the way back here. I want the hook to be more towards the head. And so I like the short shank hooks, and that hook that Yum has, the 3/0 size, is a nice short shank hook, and it's an intermediate wire. But if I had to make a choice, I would actually take the thinner wire.
Okay.
Very nice. All right, here, let me throw this question off. Josh wants to know braid or floral.
I throw fluoro on it. I throw 17 or 20. I've done it with braid, but I get way more bites with fluoro. And in the wintertime, braid will start to freeze on you too in the spool.
Very nice. I'm looking at man, it's hard because, Frank, the questions are coming in on both sides here, so I'm trying to manage.
You're getting rapid fire.
Yeah.
You need old Matt in the studio.
I know. It would help a ton here. A couple of people wanted to know what's the best gear ratio in a reel to throw it.
I like the slow gear ratios because you can never slow the bait down on purpose enough when you're amped up and you're catching fish. You just can't slow them down. So if you use a slow gear ratio and you get a little excited, which everybody does when they're catching them, you're going to stay where you need to be on retrieve speed.
That's insanely good advice there. When you have the forward-facing sonar and you're trying to keep an Alabama rig down, even under 15 feet with 30 or with 3/8 ounce or half ounce heads, you would be shocked at how quick that bait rises.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's like this on your graph when you're looking at it on the forward. I mean, you crank it, you have to stop it and let it sink. You get a couple cranks, you have to stop and let it sink. And I mean, it goes straight up even on the heaviest of heads.
Well, think about how much resistance is there. You have 5 swim baits on the thing plus spinnerbait blades. That's a lot of water resistance. So the littlest increase in speed rate starts to rise that thing out of your fish zone immediately. It's crazy. The other trick is if I get a bite and a miss, I'll keep reeling it in slow and I just shake the rod tip like that. I just keep shaking it, and then I can get rebites on a missed strike.
All right, Frank, let me ask you this. We have discussed on BTL before, specifically Kevin Van Dam using a jerkbait in all kinds of different conditions, all kinds of different seasons, spring, summer, pre-spawn, post-spawn. Oh, yeah. The dude throws a jerkbait all the time. There were a lot of us old school guys, and even some of the newer people in the game thought that the jerkbait was pretty much one-dimensional. In other words, you used it pre-spawn, and then once the spawn got going, you put it away, and you never brought it out again. It's kind of the way that it used to be. With the Flash Mob and other rigs that are like that, it has kind of this reputation of being a cold water winter type of bait that you use.
Yeah.
Do you think it would have any other applications?
Absolutely. It's great on schooling fish when they start schooling. In the summertime and then early in the fall when the bait fish start to migrate to the creek channel mouths before they go up in. It's great for that. Just like, I mean, we would spoon fish, especially like on Kerr Reservoir and stuff. When the bait starts to concentrate on the main lake in front of the big creeks, we would spoon fish over top of them. You could easily throw the Flash Mob Junior over those fish and catch them too. And the striper guys use it year round. So,
yeah,
you know, why wouldn't a bass eat it year round? I mean, they would.
Yeah, I remember going striper fishing back in the 80s and 90s, and you would see them with they would call them spider rigs.
Yeah.
You know, is what they called them when they were, and they would put sassy shats
on
the spider rigs. Yeah. I mean, those are kind of some of the original soft plastic swim baits, are they not, Frank?
Well, if I knew what you were talking about, no, yeah, they are. I just didn't want to date myself like you just did.
Dude, I'm old. I'm really old.
Yeah, yeah. Those were the first paddle tail swim baits.
Yeah,
they were.
And a lot of people out there have never seen one and have no idea what they are.
They're almost
sassy shad.
Yeah,
yeah.
You can still buy them at like Walmart, I think.
Probably.
I think you can. I mean, I used to get them in the 100-pack bulk packs. The Chartreuse Sparkle seemed to be the winner down on Lake Texoma all the time.
You just throw them on a ball head or a darter head?
And a spider rig.
Oh, you would actually troll them.
You could troll them. You could cast them like when they get schooling. Frank's dead on. When the stripers got schooling really, really, really hard. I mean, you've seen them. You've been down there before, Matt.
Oh, yeah.
When they're schooling like that. You throw that thing out there and you get 2 4-pound stripers on that spider rig. It's insanely fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's in Charlotte, we were catching hybrids and spotted bass in the same places. They were all schooling up on the shad.
Yeah.
And we were catching them the same way. In fact, it was kind of BS because you would catch 4 of those hybrids on your rig at the same time, and then you got all those hooks flailing around. It's like, you know, it's like a Game of Thrones, man. You don't want to get your hand in there.
Frank, let me ask you this. Does that work on Erie? Do those, those Great Lakes smallmouth, I mean, do you have to go perch colors or some different color on it?
No, because of the emerald shiners. There's emerald shiners and Cisco's and alewives. And so all your transparent shad imitators imitate those specific bait fish. In fact, the A-rig is deadly on smallmouth. Yeah. It's like ridiculous.
I know on Eufaula, on any of the like Texoma, Eufaula, any of the lakes that have all 3 of them, the smallmouth will murder an Alabama rig.
Oh,
I mean, yeah, they swim. Do you think for the most part the fish are following it? Are they swimming through the bait? How do you think they're eating it? Like, take this. Are they coming up from behind, saying this one's different and inhaling it? Are they shooting up through the bottom and running through the rig? Are they behind it slashing at it? How do you?
It's probably all of the above, because that bait imitates a ball of shad. Now here we put 5 lures on the bait, right?
Right.
But there's also 5 spinnerbait blades on the bait. So as the spinnerbait blades flicker, flash, and shake, so do the swim baits. So for all intensive purposes, that could look like a giant little ball of shad. And so the bass they feed up on it. So they're either running them from behind, slashing up from underneath them. They're just going for the food, man. They know that if they get close enough and open their mouth, they're getting one.
And your thoughts on why it works better in colder water? Because shad are all around in the summer and in the hot water and all that. But why, when it gets that cold and we're taught to slow down and use small stuff and finesse stuff and the fish are lethargic, can you get these megas that are plowing through a big school up?
Because they're just keying. It's just so natural that they're keying in on it. And most of the shad that time of year is suspending. So it's just natural part of the food chain. Here, this year, from probably the first week in October until right around the December 1st, that Flash Mob Junior was money. I was like the only rod I needed on the breeze, and I started throwing some of my jerk baits, and I went 50-50. I caught 50% on the jerkbait, 50% on the Flash Mob Junior. Soon as the water temperature hit 37 degrees, the jerkbait, the suspending jerkbaits, like the Rogues and stuff and the Elite Eights, started taking a little more precedence because I could hang it in the water column. I could twitch it. I could leave it there. I could twitch it. I could leave it there. We still caught some on the Flash Mob Junior, but as the water got closer to icing over, the jerkbait had a tendency to be a little bit more effective.
All right, here's what we're going to do, Frank. There's 3 questions we're going to get to, kind of rapid fire. Just respond to them fairly quick. The first one, Jamie wants to know, do you always use the bladed versions?
Yeah, I always use the bladed versions. I just like the additional flash. And I like the way it feels when I'm reeling it in. I think I have more control. I kind of know where it is in the water column better.
All right, next one, Bill wants to know, you throw the rig for pre-spawn smallmouth as well, and also what water temps in the spring, if so?
Yeah, you actually can do that, especially on Lake Erie, because they move in mass to the deeper flats. You could cover a lot of water. Same time of period you'd be throwing to suspending Rogues or some of your other suspending jerkbaits. You can easily do that.
All right.
Go ahead.
All right, next one. Chris wants to know, does the Alabama rig have a place in places like the Louisiana Delta?
Yeah, for redfish.
Yeah. That would be some fun.
Oh, dude, would that be crazy?
Yeah.
I'll get killed for saying this, but I know a guy who thought he was going to win a tour event back when it was still legal to use in the FLW tour. He called me. He goes, dude, I'm going to win a tour event in a pad field on an Alabama rig.
Yeah, and I don't see why not, because you could rig 5 weedless swim bait hooks on the thing.
He was fishing it like a horny toad on the surface through the pad field, and with them Texas rigged. And he said they would come up, and his problem was he couldn't keep them hooked up because you're dispersing your hook setting power to 5 of the wires right there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't work. I mean, look, as more mainstay, more mainstream, we're going to find a whole lot of different ways to be fishing it.
All right, let's see here. Kyle, this is going to be the last one. Frank, any advice for fishing 15-plus visibility deep mountain lakes in, I think he meant February, i.e. Lake Kiwi in South Carolina?
Dude, I fish Kiwi a lot, man. It's a great spotted bass lake. Yeah, I mean, that rig should be on fire there right now. Basically, what you're going to look for, especially on Kiwi, because if I'm not mistaken, I think they got bluebacks in it now. You're going to want to look at creek channel convergences, steep banks. The steep this time of year, especially lakes this time of year, especially bass don't have to move far to feed. They just suspend up or suspend down. Sometimes you're going to have to get on the shallow side of things and throw out deep and bring it up through them that way. So if you're not having a lot of success, you may have to change your angle on them, how you're fishing it.
All right, man. That is just great information. I know so many people out there, Frank, really appreciate you coming on, having this Day 4 show. And I think people are learning a lot about what to do with the topics that we're discussing here today. It was all about the Flash Mob and the Flash Mob Junior. So if people want to grab one of those, just go to lurenet.com and you can pick one of those up online. And let's do this, Frank. Any news, anything that you can tell us about Paint Shop coming up? Good, bad, future, quickly, tomorrow? I mean, what can you tell us?
Yeah, there's always colors coming up on Paint Shop. I'm going to have some colors coming out pretty soon. That's all I could tell you. They're pretty soon. I'm actually painting them this weekend.
Wait, so I just want to make sure this understands. So when you go to that page that says Paint Shop, so like now there's a Flat A up there, Deep Litter End, Super Spook Junior, the Racket Shock Shad, Super Rogues. So those are limited run colors. They'll
Correct.
do what, 250 to 500 of them.
Correct. I believe
and when they're gone, they're gone.
And when they're gone, they're gone. Now we might reintroduce some later, or some might go into the lineup. But for the most part, the colors are gonna be colors that are special colors. Some of them will be hard to mass produce, which is why they'll go on the paint shop. The paint shop is forever forming as we get our formulas down better for that. It's constantly changing. The cool thing about the paint shop is you never know what's going to show up there. I mean, we might bring back some old time colors that people are clamoring for that just aren't, that they don't make them anymore. And we might bring some others back, like the sun perch color, for example. But I can tell you this, keep your eyeballs peeled, because there's going to be some Bandit 200 colors coming out soon.
Very nice. All right. Any idea what we're going to talk about next week?
I want to have an idea about it, because that would make life easy for me right now. I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure. It just depends what I think about. I don't know. Maybe, I want to be timely. I want to try to be more seasonally timed right.
Are you a rogue guy?
Yeah, dude, I fish rogue a lot.
Okay, I want to know, dude, selfishly, I want a rogue show.
Okay. Well, that's coming up here.
Right, Jeffrey?
Here, let me look at my sheet here.
Oh, you already had that more towards spring.
Jerkbaits, the February show.
Okay, we can wait till February.
See,
you got blade baits on there? You got heavy metal on there?
I don't have heavy metal, but we can easily do heavy metal. I could do heavy metal next week if you want.
Yeah.
Jeffrey?
Yeah. Absolutely. I had an idea. Maybe if the fans want to suggest something, Frank, they could shoot me an email, mark@bassone.com, make a suggestion on what you would like Frank to talk about, and then we can get together and see if any of that stuff would fit into your plans, Frank.
That's cool. I love it. Fan participation is what makes this show great.
Yeah. A lot of feedback, and folks, I try to get to as many as I can. It's kind of tough here working solo, trying to cover both things, and I don't have that fill time that I usually have when Matt's in studio, but Matt did a great job today, and hopefully everybody appreciates what we're trying to do on day 4 here with Frank Scalish. So great stuff, man. All right. Ice on the lake right now, Frank?
It's getting there. We're having trouble getting out. But we're still getting out, but it's troublesome.
Troublesome. All right.
How thick can you get out at? 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch? Like when you break it, like at what point is it like too thick?
1.5 inches gets tricky. 2 inches gets rough. I mean, 2 inches is hard to get through.
That's like Titanic breaking. Like,
yeah, it is.
Wow. All right. So if you have an idea or you have a topic that you want Frank to cover on day 4 with Frank Scalish, shoot me an email, mark@bassone.com, and I'll get with Frank and we'll see if we can put a plan together to attack that topic. All right, Matt, anything else, man?
No, everyone I saw in this, it's just lurenet.com/paint shop, right?
I believe.
Paint-shop.
You could find it on LureNet.
Yeah.
You guys they're accustomed to going through the internet stuff.
Yeah.
Matt, I want to thank you for the tip today on the Flash Mob Junior, because I'm going to use that O-ring tip.
Yeah, I was just glad that there's someone else who could talk about it without it being controversial and just being like, hey, here's another tool that we use. Here's how we rig it. I mean, because, dude, for all of us here in Oklahoma, and I'm sure for those of you, I mean, it's a tool in the box now.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's a million different things you can do with it, and everyone tweaks it a little bit differently and fishes it a little bit differently. So,
which makes it cool. I mean, that makes it exciting, and it's going to develop. You watch and see. We're going to see techniques coming out of that, like, personally, I don't know why I couldn't drag it on a ledge in the summer and catch them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Just a school of crawfish. Just in perfect unison.
Big honking like summertime bass.
Wow. All right, you guys, have a safe weekend. Matt, we will see you on Monday. Anything you want to add, Frank, that you want us to ask KVD? I know you guys go way back.
Just tell them I said hi and keep on keeping on, man.
All right, we'll do that. All right, folks, that's going to wrap it up today. Our first day 4 with Frank Scalish. Back on Monday, Matt's in studio. KVD, Greg Hackney, And then let's see here. I have something else. Oh, we have a special show. One of the guys that's been on the show before caught a 9.5-pounder using the new Lowrance stuff.
Nice.
And he's going to be on the show to talk about it just for a few minutes.
Yeah, that would be good. I got questions for him.
Yeah. So good stuff there. All right, everybody, be safe this weekend. That's it. We're out of here.